October 13, 1907. The fog rolled thick through the hollows of Harlan County, Kentucky, carrying whispers that decent folk should never hear. In those remote mountains where civilization barely dared to tread, something had gone terribly wrong at the old Blackwood homestead, something that would transform two ordinary brothers into creatures that fed on human flesh. The first sign came with Daniel Morrison, a seasoned tracker from Pineville who ventured into the deep woods chasing a prize buck and simply vanished. His horse returned 3 days later, saddle empty but unmarked, as if its rider had dissolved into morning mist. The search parties found his rifle abandoned beside a creek, but no trace of Morrison himself. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not even a drop of blood. But Morrison was just the beginning. Within a fortnight, James Whitfield disappeared while tracking a wounded deer into dense thicket. His hunting companion found only his hat hanging from a low branch, swaying gently as if recently placed by unseen hands. The third disappearance shattered what remained of local confidence. Thomas Creech, a giant who had wrestled bears, vanished from his campsite. Coffee pot still warm, bedroll undisturbed, rifle loaded and ready, but Creech himself gone as completely as if the earth had swallowed him whole. The whispers began about the Blackwood brothers. Ezra and Caleb Blackwood lived in these mountains longer than most could remember, scratching existence from a ramshackle cabin perched on an unwelcoming ridge. They were strange men even by mountain standards. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that held depths no civilized person should possess. They rarely came to town, and when they did, their presence made decent people cross streets and hurry children indoors. Tell us from where are you watching this video by writing in the comments so that we can know how far our videos are reaching, and do subscribe so that you keep getting regular thrilling stories that are to come next. The cabin sat like a cancer on the mountainside, windows dark even during daylight, chimney producing smoke that rose in twisted spirals. Those brave enough to venture near reported strange sounds from within, rhythmic thudding like meat being tenderized, and low humming that vibrated in the bones of anyone who heard it. Local farmer Jeremiah Watts claimed he glimpsed the brothers through their kitchen window while tracking a lost calf. What he saw sent him fleeing down the mountain in terror, hanging shapes that might once have been human, gleaming knives moving with practiced precision, the brothers working with calm efficiency of men who had performed the same grisly tasks countless times. But Watts's story was dismissed as corn liquor and imagination, until little Mary Henderson went missing. Mary was 8 when she wandered from her family's cabin picking blackberries. The search was the largest Harlan County had ever seen, with men from 3 townships scouring every hollow, creek bed, and cave. Deputy Sheriff William Morse found her berry bucket overturned beside a game trail, and leading away from it, 2 sets of adult footprints heading directly toward the Blackwood property. Deep, widely spaced prints, as if the men carried something heavy between them. When Morse questioned the brothers, he found their cabin door barred and windows shuttered. No amount of shouting brought them to answer, though he heard movement within. Strange shuffling accompanied by whispered conversation in an unrecognizable language. Then the deputy noticed the smell. The odor emanating from the cabin was unlike anything encountered in 15 years of law enforcement. Meat left too long in heat, mixed with something sharper and unnatural. A scent that crawled into nostrils and took permanent residence in memory. Combined with strange sounds and the brothers' refusal to answer about a missing child, it painted a picture too horrible to contemplate. Mary Henderson was never found. The local preacher, Reverend Isaiah Stone, spoke of evil that had settled upon their mountain-like plague, something beyond ordinary human wickedness into realms proper Christian folk weren't meant to comprehend. His Sunday sermons took apocalyptic tones, filled with references to demons walking among men and thin boundaries between this world and darker realms. Crazy Pete Morrison, no relation to the missing hunter, lived in cave systems deeper than any other soul dared venture. He claimed to witness things that would drive sane men mad, his wild hair and haunted eyes suggesting he spoke truth. Most dismissed him as harmless lunatic, but his stories contained disturbingly consistent details. According to Pete, the Blackwood brothers had not always been the creatures they'd become. Once, perhaps 20 years ago, they'd been ordinary men, poor, certainly, and fond of their own company, but human nonetheless. The change came gradually, beginning with small transgressions and growing into something defying natural law. It started with hunger. The winter of 1887 was particularly harsh, snow piling higher than anyone remembered, and game becoming so scarce that experienced hunters returned empty-handed. The brothers, never prosperous, found themselves facing starvation as meager supplies dwindled and cold showed no signs of breaking. During this desperate time, the brothers encountered something in deep woods, something that should have remained buried where it belonged. An old Cherokee burial ground defiled by white settlers, ancient bones disturbed and spirits awakened to terrible purpose. Hidden beneath a lightning-split tree, the brothers discovered what appeared to be a leather-bound journal wrapped in oiled cloth. The book contained knowledge no living person should possess, recipes for survival that violated every law of God and decency, instructions for sustaining life through means that transformed the sustainer into something no longer entirely human. The journal had been written by a Cherokee medicine man driven mad by grief after white diseases killed his entire family. In desperation to preserve some remnant of his people's life force, he'd turned to practices his own tribe had forbidden for generations, rituals involving consuming enemies' essence to absorb their strength and vitality. But the knowledge came with a price the medicine man hadn't understood until too late. According to cursed instructions, those who partook of human flesh in prescribed manner would gain strength and longevity beyond normal limitations. They would become superior hunters, able to track prey with supernatural skill and overpower victims with inhuman strength. But in exchange for these gifts, they would find themselves changed in ways going far beyond physical. The hunger, once awakened, could never again be satisfied by ordinary food. The brothers initially dismissed the journal as madman's ravings, but as starvation deepened and death seemed inevitable, desperation overcame better judgment. When a traveling peddler took shelter during fierce blizzard, the brothers saw opportunity their growing hunger made impossible to resist. The peddler's disappearance was attributed to the storm. No one questioned the brothers' claim that he'd left early to continue his journey. But the peddler had never left the Blackwood cabin alive. What followed was transformation so gradual, even the brothers might not have noticed at first. Their strength increased, senses sharpened, ability to survive harsh winters improved dramatically. But with each passing season, need for conventional sustenance decreased, while craving for exotic nourishment grew stronger. By 1890, the brothers had claimed their first hunter. The progression from desperate cannibalism to systematic predation took several years, during which they carefully studied local hunting patterns and developed techniques for isolating and capturing prey. They learned to read the forest like scripture, understanding exactly where hunters would venture and when they'd be most vulnerable. More disturbing than growing skill as predators was the change manifesting in their appearance and behavior. They moved with inhuman grace reminiscent of wolves stalking through underbrush, eyes reflecting light like nocturnal animals, fingers growing longer and more claw-like with each passing year. Most unsettling was their apparent ability to communicate without words, as if the curse had created telepathic bond allowing supernatural coordination of hunting activities. But the most chilling aspect concerned their victim's fate. The brothers didn't simply kill and consume prey like ordinary cannibals. They developed rituals based on the Cherokee medicine man's corrupted instructions, ceremonies designed to extract not just physical nourishment but something far more profound and disturbing. The brothers believed they could absorb memories, skills, and life experiences through consumption of specific organs prepared in particular ways. Each hunter they killed made them more formidable predators, incorporating victims' forest knowledge and hunting techniques into their own supernatural abilities. This was why disappearances became more frequent and brothers grew bolder. They were no longer simply feeding, They were actively collecting expertise and memories of the region's most skilled hunters, transforming themselves into ultimate predators through process violating every natural law. As autumn deepened and first snows dusted mountain peaks, the curse revealed its true nature. Sarah Caldwell, whose husband had been among missing hunters, discovered patterns suggesting the brothers followed ritualistic schedule rather than hunting when hunger struck. Each disappearance occurred during specific moon phases at locations forming rough circle around the Blackwood cabin. More disturbing, intervals between disappearances were growing shorter, as if their need for human sustenance was increasing or they were building toward culmination, requiring accelerated collection. Sarah interviewed Cherokee elders from North Carolina reservation, men who remembered stories passed down about medicine men corrupted by grief and desperation. These stories contained details matching other accounts with disturbing accuracy. The Cherokee spoke of specific curse activated through human flesh consumption, combined with certain rituals involving bones of the dead. They described transformation symptoms beginning with increased strength and enhanced senses, but progressing until the cursed individual was no longer recognizably human. Most importantly, they revealed the curse was designed to be self-perpetuating. According to Cherokee tradition, those who fully succumbed would eventually develop irresistible compulsion to create others like themselves. The process required consumption of 7 hearts taken during specific lunar phases, followed by ritual that would bind additional victims to the same dark transformation. The brothers had claimed 6 victims since disappearances began, and the next new moon would provide perfect opportunity to complete whatever hellish transformation they'd been working toward. On November 2nd, 1907, Crazy Pete arrived in town in complete terror, fleeing his mountain cave. He'd witnessed the brothers preparing elaborate ritual. They'd arranged 7 chairs in circle around large table, with 6 occupied by arrangements of bones and personal belongings, clearly representing previous victims. The 7th chair remained empty, but placed beside it was hunting rifle belonging to tracker Marcus Webb, reported missing 2 days earlier. Pete's most disturbing observation concerned the brothers themselves, and changes their years of cursed feeding had wrought. The creatures bore almost no resemblance to human beings. They moved with fluid, inhuman grace, limbs unnaturally long, and fingers ending in claws gleaming like polished bone. Their faces had elongated into something resembling wolves, with protruding teeth and eyes glowing with internal light. Most horrifying, the brothers communicated in growls and snarls, occasionally resolving into words spoken in Cherokee language, words Pete recognized from grandfather's stories about darkest aspects of tribal medicine. The ritual was scheduled for the new moon that very night, and successful completion would transform the brothers into something even more monstrous. The approach to the cabin was eerily quiet, with not even normal nocturnal forest sounds to break oppressive silence pressing from all directions. The moon was dark, only illumination, flickering light leaking through cracks in shuttered windows. Closer approach revealed rhythmic chanting in language predating European settlement, combined with sounds of feast in progress. Through gap in shutters came first glimpse of what the Blackwood brothers had become. The creatures retained only vaguest resemblance to human beings. Elongated limbs and distorted features gave them appearance of something crawled from mankind's oldest nightmares, while movements possessed predatory grace, speaking of years perfecting roles as supernatural hunters. But the sight of their dining table nearly sent witnesses fleeing in terror. The table was set with implements belonging in no civilized household. Knives and cutting tools designed for purposes violating every law of decency, plates containing portions of meat that couldn't have come from 4-legged animals, goblets filled with liquids catching candlelight in ways suggesting they contained something more disturbing than wine. Around the table sat 6 empty chairs draped with clothing and personal effects belonging to missing hunters. The arrangement created unmistakable impression that brothers were dining in company of their victims, or at least with spiritual essence they believed they'd extracted through cannibalistic rituals. But the 7th chair was no longer empty. Bound to it with ropes cutting deep into flesh was Marcus Webb, alive but weakened by whatever torments the brothers had subjected him to during captivity. His eyes held hollow look of a man who'd witnessed horrors beyond human comprehension and knew worse was coming. The brothers paid no attention to observers outside their window, completely absorbed in ritual completion. They began ceremony combining Cherokee spiritualism elements with practices belonging to no legitimate religious tradition. Using knives gleaming with unnatural light, they carved symbols into Webb's exposed skin, symbols that seemed to writhe and move as they were inscribed, possessing independent existence. With each new marking, Webb's struggles grew weaker, and the brothers seemed to grow more animated and powerful. The ritual disruption came at a crucial moment. The shot shattered the window and struck the larger brother center mass. The creature that had been Ezra Blackwood staggered but didn't fall, instead turning toward broken window with rage so profound it seemed to darken the air. The bullet wound was visible, but no blood flowed. Strange, luminescent vapor seeped from the hole, as if its life force was composed of something other than ordinary flesh and blood. But the disruption achieved its purpose, giving opportunity to burst through the door while brothers recovered from surprise. What followed was battle-defying every assumption about reality's nature and mankind's place in natural order. The Blackwood brothers fought with inhuman strength and speed, claw-like fingers capable of rending flesh and elongated jaws filled with bone-crushing teeth. But they also displayed abilities beyond mere physical enhancement. They seemed capable of moving through shadows as doorways, predicting actions before they were made, and communicating through means requiring no spoken words. During battle chaos, Webb freed himself from bonds and stumbled toward the door, though his weakened condition made clear the brothers' ritual had already begun taking toll on his life force. His skin bore strange symbols the brothers had carved, and these markings pulsed with internal light, as if somehow alive. The discovery that would determine confrontation's outcome lay in the original Cherokee journal that had started the brothers on their path toward damnation. The leather-bound book lay open on side table, pages covered with text written in mixture of Cherokee syllabary and English translation. More important than contents were objects placed around it, items recognized as components of the ritual that had originally created the curse. According to journal's final entries, the Cherokee medicine man had eventually realized the full horror of what he'd unleashed and attempted to create reversal method. The process required destruction of certain ritual objects combined with recitation of specific words that would sever cursed individuals' connection to dark forces they'd invoked. But the reversal ritual came with its own terrible price. The curse's destruction wouldn't simply return the brothers to original human state. It would release all life force they'd stolen from victims over years, creating spiritual explosion likely to destroy everything within several miles of the ritual site. As brothers advanced with murder gleaming in inhuman eyes, the choice determined not only survival, but Harlan County's fate. Escape and leave the brothers to complete transformation into something more monstrous, knowing enhanced powers would eventually allow curse spread throughout entire region, or trigger reversal ritual and accept probability that heroic gesture would cost lives. The decision was made when the smaller brother caught an observer with claw swipe, sending them crashing into cabin wall with enough force to crack ribs. As gasping and bleeding on floor, watching in horror as both brothers turned attention toward remaining intruder, inhuman features twisted into expressions of hunger going far beyond mere physical appetite. The recitation of words found in the Cherokee medicine man's journal began. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Ritual objects around journal began glowing with intense light seeming to pierce reality's fabric, while brothers themselves were suddenly frozen as if turned to stone. Strange symbols covering Webb's skin began to fade, and the man seemed to grow stronger as whatever dark influence had been draining his life force was suddenly severed. But the most dramatic change occurred in the brothers themselves. The creatures began reverting to original human forms, but the process clearly caused tremendous agony. Elongated limbs contracted with audible snapping sounds, protruding teeth receded into normal proportions, and glowing eyes returned to ordinary human brown. For a brief moment, Recognition and horror dawned in their faces as they remembered exactly what they'd become and what they'd done during years of cursed existence. Then the cabin exploded in blast of light and energy, visible from 20 miles away. The official report listed the incident as gas explosion caused by faulty equipment in the brothers' primitive cabin. The deaths of Ezra and Caleb Blackwood were attributed to their inability to escape conflagration in time. The disappearances of local hunters were explained as unfortunate accidents during particularly dangerous hunting season, and the case was officially closed. But the curse had been broken, its effects lingering in ways that would influence the rest of many lives. Webb bore permanent scars from ritual symbols carved into his skin, though they no longer glowed with supernatural light. Others developed uncanny ability to sense supernatural presences, skills that would serve them during later encounters. Sometimes on particularly dark nights when wind howls through mountain passes and shadows seem to move independently, questions arise whether the curse was truly destroyed or merely transferred to new hosts. In weeks following confrontation with the Blackwood brothers, new disappearances began occurring in distant counties. Disappearances following patterns remarkably similar to those witnessed in Harlan County. And sometimes, in darkest moments, suspicion grows that the Cherokee medicine man's journal contained knowledge never meant to be completely eliminated from the world. Perhaps some curses are too powerful to be truly broken and can only be passed from one generation of hosts to the next, waiting for right combination of desperation and opportunity to manifest again in new and even more terrible forms. The mountains of Kentucky still hold their secrets, and wise travelers do well to avoid deep hollows where hunger and desperation might awaken things that should remain forever buried in darkness of the past.